What's up, nerds? Turns out, even George Lucas doesn't like the sequels. I just saw this about 3 minutes ago from Star Wars Theory, which is like the world's expert on Star Wars. Like, it's like George Lucas, and then it's like Star Wars Theory. It's crazy. Saying, telling a video about how George Lucas said he fails and felt betrayed about the way that the sequels have gone. I pulled up the exact same article as he did, so I made sure I got all the words right. Disney CEO says Star Wars creator George Lucas felt upset and betrayed when told sequel trilogy wouldn't follow his plots. In Disney CEO Bob Iger's memoir, blah 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 blah, released the other day, Iger reflects on Star Wars creator George Lucas feeling upset and betrayed upon learning Disney intended to go in another direction and forego using his plots for the sequel trilogy following the company's 2012 acquisition of Lucasfilm. Excuse me. At some point in the process, George told me that he had completed outlines for 3 new movies. He agreed to send us 3 copies of the outlines, one for me, one for the Disney some head honcho, Alan Braidman, and one for Chief Creative Officer Alan Horn, who'd just been hired to run our studio. Horn and I read George's outlines and decided we needed to buy them, though we made clear in the purchase agreement that we would not be contractually obligated to adhere to the plot lines he'd laid out. He continues, he knew that I was going to stand firm on the question of creative control, but it wasn't an easy thing for him to accept, and so he reluctantly agreed to be available to consult with us at our request. I promised that we would be open to his ideas, but like the outlines, we would be under no obligation. Iger then details meeting with Lucas, screenwriter someone, and Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy at Skywalker Ranch to talk about their ideas for the film. George immediately got upset as they began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that we weren't using one of the stories he submitted during the negotiations. The truth was, Kathy, J.J. Abrams, Alan, and I had discussed the direction in which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George had outlined. George knew we weren't contractually bound to anything, but he thought that our buying the story treatments was a tacit promise that we'd follow them, and he was disappointed that his story was being discarded. I'd been so careful since our first conversation not to mislead him in any way, and I didn't think I had now, but I could have handled it better. He then admits, now, in the first meeting with him about the future of Star Wars, George felt betrayed. And while this whole process would never have been easy for him, we'd gotten off to an unnecessarily rocky start. Disney sequel trilogy ultimately incorporated ideas that resembled Lucas's. Lucas once envisioned a female Jedi Padawan, Kira, eventually materialized as Daisy Ridley's Rey, and an aged and exiled Luke Skywalker, played by Mark Hamill. The story between an in-training Rey and reluctant teacher Luke in Rian Johnson's Star Wars The Last Jedi was inspired in part by Lucas's original concept, with the Jedi killer character imagined by Lucas earlier being realized as Kylo Ren. Lucas then went on about how he was going to have it be the sequel trilogy was going to be about getting into the microbiotic world of the Wills, which are, obviously these microbiotic characters, but they like live on the Force, and they were supposed to be the ones that were like telling the Skywalker story, which apparently is why it says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's not just a fun little card, it's because the Wills are supposed to be the ones telling this story. Lucas said, if I'd held on to the company, I could have done it, and then it would have been done. Of course, a lot of the fans would have hated it, just like they did the Phantom Menace and everything, but at least the whole story from beginning to end would be told. That kind of hurts a little bit. I never hated Phantom Menace as a kid. I very much enjoyed it, and because I grew up with it now, I can see that, the stuff that's not great, like the pod racing, is rough, and the acting is not great. But it did continue a good story. Additionally, I'm just going to skim through this part, but additionally, Lucas was disappointed when he saw The Force Awakens. He didn't even attempt to try and hide it, because according to Lucas, there was nothing new about the film which caught his eye or interest. In each of the films in the original trilogy, it was important to present new worlds, new stories, new characters, and new technologies. In this one, he said, there weren't enough visual or technical leaps forward. He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't appreciating the pressure we were under to give ardent fans a film that felt quintessentially Star Wars, Iger explained. Which, if you know he wasn't wrong, then what? And you weren't under any pressure. Like, we didn't expect any Star Wars. You could have taken your time to make sure that you did good. And a film that felt quintessentially Star Wars, it didn't to me. Aside from the fact that it was a straight up freaking rehash of A New Hope, when watching it, it didn't feel like a Star Wars movie to me. It felt like any other sci-fi movie. It felt like Star Trek, also done by Abrams. Okay, nothing else is really interesting here, but yeah, the guy that created Star Wars is disappointed and betrayed by the direction that it has gone. Let that sink in. Now, I'm well aware that Lucas didn't do everything. He didn't direct everything like some people like to seem to imagine. Like, the original trilogy, he kind of didn't. There were other people in charge of, like, the director stuff. He was always more of the idea man. He wrote the story. He came up with the way it was going to be, and then someone else took that and was like, all right, this is how it's going to play out. And then the prequel trilogy, he was the one that directed that, and everyone was like, hey, this is garbage, even though it wasn't. Phantom Menace isn't great, I can admit that, but I like it. Anyway, and he was freaking heartbroken by that, because he's like, all right, I want to do this the way I want to do it. Everyone tells him, this is garbage, and you're a garbage person for ruining Star Wars for me. It's like, you wonder why he didn't want to continue. And now we see where we are. I mean, you know it's bad whenever freaking Lucas himself, and Star Wars Theory, that guy who's always trying to stay out of the conflict in terms of, like, what's good and what's bad in Star Wars. He just likes to say the good stuff and just say facts. But when all these people, and George Lucas himself, not only disappointed in the new stuff, but betrayed by the fact that they didn't use the ideas he made, the ideas that they bought off of him. It wasn't just the rights to Lucasfilm, which is what I thought it was. I thought it was just, hey, George, we want to make some Star Wars. We'll buy it from you. Okay. No, they didn't just buy Lucasfilm. He had an idea. He already had pretty much written out what the next 3 movies were going to be, and that was part of what they bought from him. And they just said, nah, we're not going to do this. We're going to take this little bit and this little bit. We're going to mix it up, but no, we're not going to do that. And so this guy sells his freaking life's work and what he wanted to finish out something, and then they just completely butcher it and do nothing along the lines of what he wanted, what he was hoping his legacy would become, basically, because, you know, the Skywalker saga, he wanted the title up. I don't know many of the details about what he was going to do, and I don't think we'll ever know, aside from that the Willows were going to be involved. But that's freaking heartbreaking, man. That the guy that created this, arguably one of the best world builders and idea men ever, aside from maybe Tolkien. He's probably a better world builder, but I'm not going to get into that. I mean, he created all of this just out of his own imagination, you know? I don't think he had any idea that it would blossom into what it become with just how expansive Star Wars is. But that guy that created everything, he doesn't like what it is now. It's not just that he doesn't like it, he's disappointed, he's betrayed. He created something, and someone came along and said, hey, can we do that? We'll give you a lot of money for it, and you can, you know, consult us on how to go about it. And he was like, okay, that sounds good, maybe you'll be better at this. And then they just basically said, screw you, we're gonna do it our way, because Disney. And then he just has to sit back and watch in horror as the legacy that he created comes crashing down in flames. It seems that there's a possibility that Disney might be picking it up a little bit with their upcoming projects. There's an Obi-Wan series coming out with Ewan McGregor. Mandalorian looks good. It's done by Jon Favreau. Dave Filoni was involved, both of whom are massive Star Wars fans and really care about like the actual mythos of it. And Jon Favreau called in George Lucas like all the time to get his advice on how he wanted to go about, despite this being an original concept. You know, Lucas didn't make up the Mandalorian, but he's like, hey, Lucas, you are Star Wars. Tell me how to make this work, because Favreau and Filoni actually respect Star Wars. So there's a chance that they can come back and, you know, Star Wars won't be butt anymore. But man, that's just so sad. The guy that created it hates what it is now, out of no fault of his own. Let that sit with you. With that, like and subscribe if you want to keep updated on all this kind of stuff. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to do better about this. I got, you know, these 2 out in 1 day. What up? I just been super busy, but I'm going to try and get back to it. So, catch you guys later. Deuces.